In the heart of Buckingham Palace, where centuries of power have been shaped behind tightly closed doors, something unimaginable unfolded. It wasn't a grand state event or a political meeting dressed in fanfare. This was different, quieter, more intimate, and infinitely more dangerous. In a room known only to a few, under the weight of crystal chandeliers and inherited tension, the royal bloodline gathered. No aides, no advisors, no press, just the firm's innermost circle, those bound not by protocol, but by blood. And it was in that silence, thick with unspoken expectation, that Princess Anne chose to shatter everything they thought they knew. She didn't clear her throat. She didn't soften the blow. She simply looked across the table, locked eyes with her brother the king, and spoke 12 words that would leave him breathless. A sentence that didn't just stun Charles, but cracked through the carefully preserved image of a monarchy untouched by surprise. These weren't her words. They belonged to someone else, someone whose voice had shaped an era, yet whose final thoughts had remained hidden in the shadows. Queen Elizabeth II, until now. Anne wasn't delivering a charming anecdote from childhood, or a gentle reminder of their mother's legacy. Her words carried weight, a deliberate, haunting kind of weight that silenced even the most seasoned royals. There had been no official record, no signature, no trace in the archives. What she revealed had never been written, never meant to surface. It was a private confession whispered by the Queen to her daughter in her final days, away from the glare of tradition and scrutiny, a truth too sacred to document, but too important to ignore. And that truth? It wasn't about Charles, not about William. It wasn't about lineage, nor law, nor centuries of succession. It was about Catherine. With every syllable, Anne exposed the monarchy's best-kept secret, that Queen Elizabeth believed the survival of the crown, its very future, depended not on her sons, but on a woman who had never once asked for power, Catherine, the Princess of Wales. The Queen had seen something the world missed, something the firm itself had underestimated, a quiet strength, a kind of unshakable resolve, a modern monarch cloaked in humility. The room grew colder. The tension tightened. The message didn't question Charles's right to the throne, but it challenged everything that came after. Anne's words didn't suggest a coup or rebellion, they suggested reality. That the Queen, in her final breaths, foresaw a world shifting faster than tradition could withstand. And in that vision, it wasn't bloodline that would hold the monarchy together. It was character. For decades, succession had been painted in ink, passed from father to son, mother to heir. But now, as Anne's revelation echoed off the palace's ancient walls, it seemed the Queen had drawn a new line not of rule, but of responsibility. And at the end of that line stood Catherine, not as an accessory to power, but as its last safeguard. No one spoke. No one moved. Charles sat in stunned silence, William caught between pride and fear. And Catherine, always graceful, always poised, absorbed the moment with the same quiet dignity that had earned her this unseen crown. Whether the world was ready or not, the Queen had spoken. Not through press releases or public addresses, but through the only person she trusted to tell the reader truth exactly as it was. But if Elizabeth's words carried such weight, why now? Why did Princess Anne wait until this exact moment to unleash the monarchy's most pivotal secret? Why guard it in silence until now? What if the future of the monarchy never truly belonged to the king, but to the woman standing silently beside him? That question so radical, so unthinkable was the one Queen Elizabeth dared to ask in her final moments. And it was the very answer she passed to Princess Anne, in a conversation stripped of ceremony, stripped of tradition. It wasn't about birthright. It wasn't about hierarchy. It was about survival. A monarchy under siege by modern scrutiny needed something more than royal blood. It needed royal resilience. And Elizabeth, after nearly a century of watching power both uplift and unravel those around her, believed she had seen the answer. It wasn't Charles. It wasn't William. It was Catherine. Princess Anne, known for her stoic discipline and no-nonsense loyalty to the throne, didn't speak those words easily. She carried them for months, maybe even years, unsure of the right time, perhaps afraid of what might unfold when she did. But when the moment finally arrived, when the family was gathered and history hung in the air like thunder, she didn't speak from grief or sentiment. She spoke from duty, from the burden of a message too heavy to keep hidden. Anne had seen her mother's eyes as she spoke those final words. Eyes that had seen wars, scandals, abdications. Eyes that didn't waver even when the world did. And in those eyes, there was no doubt. The Queen didn't hope Catherine might one day rise. She knew she had to. It wasn't a slight against Charles, nor a rejection of William. The Queen had spent her life upholding the line of succession. But as the modern world tightened its grip on public figures, and as royal mystique gave way to viral headlines and relentless exposure, Elizabeth knew tradition alone wouldn't protect the crown. The world was changing. The monarchy could no longer survive on pageantry and privilege. It needed a human soul. Someone steady, intuitive, deeply rooted in values yet unafraid to bend with the storm. She saw that in Catherine. A quiet strength that never asked for attention. A stillness that absorbed pressure instead of reacting to it. She wasn't polished like a performer. She was anchored like a protector. The Queen didn't need Catherine to command the world. She needed her to steady it, to absorb the chaos that had begun tearing holes in the monarchy's once impenetrable image. And that's why she chose to speak to Anne, not to Charles, not to aides, not to historians. Because Anne, like Catherine, was a woman forged in discipline, used to carrying what others could not. She would understand. And when Anne spoke those words aloud at last, it wasn't a threat to the throne. It was a recalibration of its future. But for all the shock the revelation caused, it uncovered something even more unsettling, something that had quietly grown beneath the surface. Because while the Queen's prophecy now echoed through the palace walls, Catherine herself had already been engaged in a war no one had noticed. A battle not for titles or status, but for meaning, for identity, and for purpose in a world that constantly questioned her worth. Why was Princess Anne clocking in nearly 4 times the royal duties of Catherine? The tabloids pounced on the numbers, like vultures circling a wounded monarch. Anne had completed a staggering 457 official engagements in a single year, while Catherine, the Princess of Wales, had logged just 128. The difference wasn't subtle, it was glaring. And the headlines weren't kind. They didn't just raise questions, they issued accusations. Laziness, privilege, absence. As if public duty was a scoreboard and Catherine had somehow dropped the ball. The story wrote itself, an overworked royal veteran carrying the load, while the future queen was busy curating her image. Or at least, that's what they wanted you to believe. But the truth, buried beneath that avalanche of judgment, told a very different story. It wasn't that Catherine was disengaged. It was that she was engaged in something the monarchy had never truly prioritized before parenting. Not as a symbolic gesture, not as a photo op, but as a full-time responsibility. While Anne fulfilled her duties on the world stage, Catherine was waging a quiet battle behind palace walls. She was shaping the future not through speeches or appearances, but through bedtime stories, homework, and moments too sacred for cameras. She wasn't retreating. She was investing, and not in herself in the next generation of the crown. This wasn't an act of rebellion. It was a radical redefinition of royal responsibility. Catherine made a conscious decision to place her children's emotional well-being above public optics. Prince George was growing fast, and so was the pressure on his young shoulders. Princess Charlotte was being watched by the world, expected to remain poised while still learning who she was. And little Prince Louis was already being judged for how he waved, how he fidgeted, how he smiled. Catherine wasn't just a mother, she was a shield, a buffer between her children and the crushing weight of an institution that had consumed generations before them. And what shocked many was that the very woman known for her iron dedication to duty, Princess Anne, stood in quiet solidarity with Catherine. In a rare moment of candor, Anne dismissed the criticism and said simply, "Home must come first." It wasn't a concession, it was a validation, a rare acknowledgement that not all royal service takes place in the spotlight. Sometimes, the most important battles are the ones fought far from the public eye. Yet the numbers, like daggers, kept coming. Critics refused to accept silence as strength. They demanded visibility. They equated service with statistics. But Catherine wasn't playing their game. She didn't issue statements. She didn't launch PR campaigns. She stayed silent, composed, resolute. Because behind that decision, behind every missed engagement, every absence from the court circular, Catherine was building something far more powerful than applause. She was constructing a new foundation, not of appearances, but of legacy. A kind of influence that didn't demand attention, but would one day redefine what it meant to serve. And while the world focused on numbers, they missed the quiet revolution, already underway, one that would soon shake the very walls of the monarchy. While the world counted her appearances, scrutinized her absence, and measured her worth in headlines and handshakes, Catherine was counting something far more important. Every lesson, every briefing, every moment of royal instruction that would one day prepare her to safeguard the throne. Beneath the public's gaze, beyond the camera's lens, she was mastering the unseen art of monarchy. Because while others chased visibility, she pursued wisdom. And while they obsessed over optics, she quietly absorbed the mechanics of power. She wasn't learning in front of flashing bulbs or televised speeches. Catherine's education was private, purposeful, and far more profound. She studied the intricacies of palace operations, the cold arithmetic of royal budgets, the shifting sands of international diplomacy, the influence of policy on public perception. These were not ceremonial duties. These were the levers of real power. And guiding her through this uncharted territory wasn't a team of advisors or a public relations expert. It was someone who had worn the weight of duty without ever demanding applause, Princess Anne. Anne didn't offer lessons in grandeur. She offered clarity. Her mentorship came in the form of unspoken truths and shared silences. It was never about being seen. It was about being steady. And Catherine listened not to be liked, not to outshine, but to endure. Anne, who had spent decades anchoring the monarchy with unflinching resolve, had finally found someone who mirrored her values. Discipline over drama, loyalty over legacy, and above all, action over acclaim. That is where Catherine thrived. She didn't need to be first in line to understand the gravity of leadership. She knew her role wasn't to decorate the crown, it was to defend it, quietly and consistently. So while critics questioned her absence from galas and tours, Catherine was sitting in strategy sessions. While tabloids counted how many hands she shook, she was memorizing the consequences of every policy decision tied to the royal institution. She was preparing, layer by layer, for the storm no one else saw coming. This was not the journey of a woman waiting to be handed power. This was the evolution of someone building it from within, slowly, deliberately. And in that slow burn, there was something unmistakably familiar, something that echoed the reign of Queen Elizabeth herself. A woman whose strength had never been loud, but had shaped history nonetheless. Elizabeth had ruled not through force, but through foresight. Not by outshining others, but by outlasting them. And now, that same quiet command was taking root in Catherine. She wasn't trying to fill shoes. She was carving her own path. A new kind of royal leadership was forming, one without vanity, without spectacle. The kind that didn't demand to be noticed, but couldn't be ignored. But this kind of ascent never comes without cost. And Catherine's greatest challenge wasn't royal hierarchy or public expectation. It was something far more ruthless. Something even Anne never had to face, a war that would be fought in a battlefield the monarchy had never fully understood. The digital world. Princess Anne didn't have to survive social media, but Catherine does, every single day. In Anne's era, judgment arrived in printed headlines once a morning and disappeared just as quickly. There was time to recover, time to correct, time to breathe. But Catherine was born into a world where judgment never sleeps. In this new age, everything she says, everything she doesn't say, every glance, every absence, every smile becomes ammunition. Her life isn't just lived in the public eye, it's dissected under a microscope sharpened by algorithms, fed by speculation, and amplified by strangers who know nothing of her truth. She's not just a royal, she's a target. The monarchy has never faced anything like this. In the past, mystery was its shield. Silence was strategy. Today, silence is interpreted as guilt. Mystery is recast as coldness. And Catherine, poised, private, deliberate, has become the lightning rod for a culture obsessed with instant answers and emotional reactions. If she attends an event, she's called performative. If she misses it, she's called absent. If she smiles, she's calculated. If she stays solemn, she's cold. The world demands transparency, but punishes vulnerability. And through it all, Catherine walks a line so fine it could snap beneath her. There is no winning. Not in the digital court of public opinion. And unlike Anne, who was allowed to grow into her role with quiet dignity and limited interference, Catherine is expected to be flawless from the first moment. Forever. She can't make a wrong step without it becoming a trending topic. She can't choose privacy without being accused of hiding something. She can't show strength without being labeled ambitious. The contradictions swirl around her like a storm, designed to break her, but she does not bend. What's most remarkable is not that Catherine survives this world, it's how she survives it. With no outbursts, no retaliation, no interviews lashing out. She doesn't fight back with words or statements. She simply continues. Calm, controlled, composed. She walks through the noise without letting it shape her. And in that stillness, in that unyielding restraint, she becomes even more powerful. Because she isn't trying to silence the world, she's learning to outlast it. And that is something no title, no tiara, no official decree can teach. It's a kind of internal strength forged only by fire. Even Anne, known for her unflinching realism, has acknowledged the brutality of Catherine's world. In a resurfaced interview, she said it plainly, it was easier in her time. No endless commentary, no viral videos, no strangers dissecting her every movement. It wasn't pity, it was recognition. A rare admission from a woman who rarely offers comfort. But she saw it too. She saw what Catherine faces, and she knew that the strength required to stay standing in such an environment was extraordinary. Still, not even the harshest critics could have anticipated what came next. Because in 2023, Catherine made a decision so personal, so quietly, defiant, it shook even the monarchy's most loyal followers. It wasn't loud, it wasn't publicized, but it revealed a truth no press conference ever could, a truth about who she really is and what she's willing to sacrifice to protect what matters most. She skipped the Royal Gala of the Year not for scandal, but for homework. The Earthshot Prize, an initiative tied directly to the future of the planet, and one of the monarchy's most high-profile events, went ahead without its most visible royal. Catherine was expected. Cameras were ready. Tabloids had cleared front page space. But when she didn't show, the reaction was swift and brutal. Speculation flooded the media like a tidal wave. Was she ill? Was something wrong? Had the palace hidden a deeper crisis? Headlines didn't wait for facts. They spun narratives. And once again, the silence was weaponized. But this time, the truth was simple and far more powerful than any rumor. Catherine had stayed home. Not for herself, not for drama, but for her son. Prince George, second in line to the throne, had exams the next day. And in a move that stunned not just critics, but even some inside the palace, Catherine made her decision. Quietly, she stayed by his side. No press release, no justification, just presence. A mother helping her child prepare for one of the many silent pressures that come with growing up royal. That single act spoke louder than any speech she could have made, on stage, and it wasn't lost on those watching closely. In that moment, Catherine revealed what truly defined her version of duty. Not appearances, not applause, but commitment. The kind of commitment that doesn't wear a crown or wave from balconies, the kind that shows up in quiet rooms when no one is watching. She wasn't just nurturing a child, she was shaping a future king. And she knew the difference between ceremonial, duty, and generational impact. Most wouldn't understand. Many didn't even try. But Catherine never needed the world's approval, only her family's strength. Once again, Princess Anne, the monarch's iron figure, came to Catherine's defense. Publicly, briefly, and with her trademark clarity, Anne dismissed the criticism. Some duties aren't listed in public schedules, she said. And in that one sentence, she carved out space for a different kind of royal responsibility. One rooted in love, foresight, and the understanding that a monarchy can't survive. If the next generation is raised by headlines, it must be shaped by hands that are willing to set aside ego to build something real. Catherine wasn't absent. She was exactly where she needed to be. And that decision, that quiet defiance, became a turning point. Because it confirmed what Queen Elizabeth had always believed. Catherine's power didn't lie in how she looked at events. It lived in how she led without needing to be seen. Her choices weren't about pleasing the public. They were about preserving something deeper, something sacred. And while critics spun their stories, Catherine remained still, unshaken, undistracted. Because in the end, real duty doesn't beg for recognition. It simply does what matters most. Yet as the earth-shot headlines faded and attention drifted elsewhere, one final thread remained unresolved, one connection that had grown far beyond public view. A quiet relationship, forged in trust and tempered by history. The personal bond between Anne and Catherine. A relationship that didn't just defy expectations, but quietly transformed legacy into prophecy. It wasn't just mentorship, it was a royal torch passed in silence. What began as subtle glances across rooms and quiet nods behind closed doors evolved into something far more profound. An unspoken alliance that defied generations of royal conditioning. Anne and Catherine, separated by decades but united by conviction, found in each other something that couldn't be taught: mutual respect, born not of status, but of shared sacrifice. While others around them scrambled for attention, these two women carved out a path shaped not by noise, but by purpose. And it was in that silence that something radical happened. The definition of royal womanhood changed. Anne never dictated. She didn't micromanage. She didn't need to. Her power had always come from discipline, from showing up, from bearing the weight of duty without complaint. And Catherine? She absorbed it all with humility. She didn't mimic Anne, she mirrored her values in her own way. Where Anne had once built her legacy by sheer consistency, Catherine was now shaping hers through deliberate restraint and razor-sharp intent. Together, they weren't just participating in the monarchy, they were re-engineering its foundation. No longer ornamental figures standing beside kings, they had become operational forces, subtly steering the institution through its most volatile age. Queen Elizabeth saw it. Long before the public connected the dots, the Queen understood what was forming. Not just admiration between two women, but a bridge between eras. A legacy being handed down without fanfare or ceremony. Elizabeth, a master of silent influence herself, recognized that if the monarchy were to endure the turbulence of modernity, it wouldn't be because of pageantry or bloodlines alone. It would be because of character, because of those willing to bear the burden of legacy with grace and grit. And in Anne and Catherine, she found her answer. She had seen Anne endure the crown's sharpest expectations without asking for praise. She had watched Catherine walk through fire with dignity that couldn't be faked. Neither chased applause, and yet both had become pillars. Elizabeth knew that real royalty doesn't always roar, it often whispers, and still commands the room. And when she gave Anne her final message, those fateful words about Catherine, it wasn't just trust she passed on, it was belief. She believed Catherine wasn't just capable of supporting the monarchy. She believed Catherine could anchor it. Now, with the Queen gone, that quiet confidence has only grown louder. Catherine, with her calm eyes and steel spine, has risen not as a reaction, but as a revelation. She isn't loud, but she is unshakable. She doesn't need to dominate a room to leave an impact. And in that stillness, she has become something far more powerful than the public ever expected. A stabilizing force in a kingdom riddled with uncertainty. The world may look for fireworks, but the monarchy survives through its embers, quiet, persistent, and enduring. Because Queen Elizabeth may be gone, but the legacy she entrusted to Catherine now echoes louder than ever. And in that quiet message, history may have found its next great leader, not born for the crown, but built for it. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.